Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to CSRA's first community of practice session of the year. We are thrilled to have you join us for what promises to be an engaging and insightful discussion. As CSRA, we're trying to foster a dynamic environment for sharing knowledge, ideas, and best practices, all with the goal of eliminating serious injuries and fatalities. That's why we create this strong community of industry leaders and academic experts and safety professionals across all levels. Hence, this beautiful panel you have right here. This year's sessions have a renewed focus on showcasing our collective research and highlighting its practical applications in the industry. As you know, these community of practice meetings are free of charge, and we're proud to offer them as our way of giving back to the community. So today's topic is principles of energy-based safety, certainly a key focus for us recently. And we'll begin with a 10-minute research review, followed by a panel discussion, and conclude with a 10-minute community Q&A. We will keep the Q&A open throughout this entire session, so please feel free to ask questions or use the chat to communicate with us. We'll monitor that throughout the session. With that, I'd like to welcome our panel and hand it over to our very own Dr. Matt Hollowell to kick off the research review, starting with a quick intro of himself, perhaps. Thank you so much for being here to the panel and to Matt.
Welcome, everybody. It's good to see you all this morning. Looks like some healthy attendance. Shout out to Alif before I begin. This is a new platform for us, as you can tell, for those of you who have been on our community of practice calls in the past. We're trying something new here, trying something a little bit more technologically advanced, and hopefully it works out nice and smooth. So give us feedback on that as well if you like it or if you don't. Good morning to everybody. I know that my northern colleagues are used to the snow and the cold, but if you're in Louisiana or Texas, you may have woken up to a little bit of snow. So maybe a different day for you all down south. Welcome to our world, I suppose. So I'm going to get us kicked off today, and then I'm going to turn over to an esteemed panel. Got a bunch of folks with me today who I have worked closely with for years, who are going to share their practical experiences with the topic of energy-based safety. I'm going to give you just a little bit of an overview of some of the research. That's going to be our format of the community of practice meetings, is you're going to hear a little bit of a research recap and then hear a lot about how people are using those topics. So I'm going to keep my part somewhat brief and make sure we have plenty of time for you all to hear from your colleagues about how energy-based safety has been working for them. I will mention that in these community of practice meetings, we're going to work our way through many different topics, but energy-based safety is one that sort of underpins them all. And as an academic, I will say one of the things that we strive to do is develop a set of first principles that we base our research programs on. And ideally, those research principles aren't value statements or philosophies, but are more evidence-based. In other words, if every bit of human history was erased and you restarted the field of safety again, what are the things that would remain the same? And that's what I would say energy-based safety was one of those things. And the principles are universal. They're matters of physics and medicine, and a little bit less of the ideation and ideology. So you can see the screen, the slide I have on the screen. This is the why of our community. The mission and vision of the CSRA is to eliminate serious injuries and fatalities from the construction industry, as construction is broadly defined. And the graph on the left is really what is the best visual description of why that mission and vision is so important. As you can see, the rate of recordable injuries, the top bar, has declined year over year for now over 20 years, but the fatality rate in the industry has been statistically stable. I think most folks on this call will know that. by now. But what it's really telling us is that there may be kind of a tale of two safeties in that, managing low severity injuries is different than managing high severity injuries. And the old safety pyramid is frankly incorrect in terms of this idea that those ratios are stable. That was a made up piece of evidence years and years ago that underpinned safety for a long time. And we are really now just moving on beyond that. So, what we do understand now in the research is that the hazards that hurt people are not the same as the hazards that kill people. And that was from Arnaldo's research and what we called our SIF team. We studied that for a 2-year period to learn what was different, perhaps, between high severity and low severity injuries. And we studied human factors, we studied leadership, we studied organizational factors. And although many of those things contribute to safety broadly and generally, the only thing that's really different about serious injuries and fatalities specifically is whether or not high energy was present and the extent to which we control it. So that will be the theme of what I'm going to share with you right now. I'm going to share these first principles with you, and then I am going to turn over to my colleagues here. So the first principle, which I bet most of you are very familiar with, is that energy causes harm. So if we look at the fundamentals of physics and medicine, we understand that there are various sources of energy that we need to do work. So the definition of energy is the capacity to do work. So what that means is we need energy to lift things, cut things, move things, etc. And in many regards, we work on energy, right? So if you're in the utility sector or you're working in oil and gas or even building data centers, those are energy oriented facilities. So we're not going to get rid of energy and we're not going to get rid of people. So, what that means is that safety is really our ability to manage our energy to get work done without that energy coming in contact with a person. Now, what we learned through the research is that we see some types of energy naturally, gravity and motion in particular, and those are processed almost instinctually in the brain. Very low cost, very easy to do. But we tend to overlook other types of energy, not because we're being lazy or incompetent, but because our brains are hardwired to focus on some things at the expense of others. So, other types of energies like tension and compression, things under pressure, things changing temperature, radiation, etc. What we've learned is those are more difficult to process, and our brains don't do so as instinctually or naturally for us. But the energy wheel, which you see in the upper right hand corner, is sort of the antidote to that because it provides us with the reminders to think about the hazards that we otherwise overlook. And so that simple technology, if you will, just oftentimes a hard hat sticker or a magnet as a new way of thinking about hazard recognition, it really expands or opens the aperture for us to see more hazards more easily. And in particular, the hazards that we typically overlook. So that 45%, that's our skill without any tools. That's what we see instinctually. And the energy wheel helps us get up closer to that 70, 75% skill level. And that's based on that first principle that energy causes harm and that hazards are energy sources that require us to manage. The second principle, something that we have learned much more recently, is that more energy causes more harm. So that probably makes sense. A heavier object higher in the sky has more potential for harm than a lighter object lower to the ground. But what we were able to study is trying to figure out what is that line, right? What is too much energy? How much energy can the human body sustain before the energy causes a life-altering, life-threatening, or life-ending result? And so we all have this experience. You can have a static electricity shock, no problem, right? It might be unpleasant, but it's not going to be, fatally harmful. However, if you were to come in contact with 10 amps of electrical energy, the human body simply can't withstand that. So what we learned through the study was the high energy line, the limit of what the human body can sustain, is about 1,500 joules. And so that means at any given time, we can sustain less than that without permanent harm. But anything more than that, we're in the red zone. And so throughout all the research, we learned that this concept of high energy was born through that study. And the icons in the right hand side, those are representing common high energy hazards like suspended loads, heavy mobile equipment, electrical contact over 50 volts, etc. And many have started to refer to these types of things as the stuff that kills you, or the shit that kills you, sticky. So this is really the pivot, if you will, into SIF prevention, from general safety into SIF prevention. Is the research shows that we need to be managing high energy hazards. So the question is, what do we do about them, right? So we've used this term controls for many years. We've had several projects on controls, one of which ended last year. And what we have been thinking about is not an answer to the question of like, what are the different types of controls? We've heard about preventative and mitigative. We've talked about absolute and energy controls. There's been lots of critical controls, lots of different names for controls. But our question was a little different. We were trying to focus on, when you have a high energy hazard, what makes a control enough, right? What's sufficient? So unlike the hierarchy, which tells us our types and kind of an ordering, we need to draw a line and say what is enough for a high energy hazard. And that opens up again a SIF specific strategy. So the three elements for a direct control: it needs to be targeted, it needs to be strong, meaning it mitigates the energy when it's installed, verified, and used properly. And it works even if somebody makes a mistake. And I don't know if our colleague Mike Kwashny is here, but he put it really well. He said a direct control will save your life by itself, even if somebody messes up. So examples being machine guarding and fall protection systems, hard barricades. But what this also does is it also kind of bifurcates controls and says, well, some of them aren't enough. So situational awareness, or being trained and mindful, those things are very important, and they're there to serve control of energy, but they're really not controls in their own right. And so the last thing I'll mention here is that none of these things, yeah, there's Mike down in the chat. None of these things actually effectively work, right? Unless people are at their best. People install controls, people verify controls. And so we need to make sure that this isn't just a physical control oriented exercise, but that we're recognizing humans, potential for human error, how we create context in which people can thrive. So all of this put together, this is not a program. It's not another thing to do in safety. It's a way to do the things we're already doing, but better, and with a more sharpened focus on serious injuries and fatalities. So none of these things are suggesting new programs. We have really great programs out there that have been developed over the course of decades. But we can look at as energy-based safety as a way to do all of those things with a SIF focus. So, for example, you can put, use the energy wheel and the high energy icons and direct controls in pre-jobs. You can look for those things and ask questions about those things in a safety walk. We've even looked at measuring safety differently through high energy control assessments, or HECA. And then if you're familiar with the safety classification and learning model for trending and learning, that's based on high energy and direct control. So this is an underpinning of a lot of things. These are our first principles, something that you'll see each one of these communities of practice build upon over the years. And hopefully you'll see that it helps improve practice and add some SIF focus to the things you're already doing. So, Alif, I'm going to stop there on my section and turn it to you to moderate our panel of excellent folks. Alif, I think you might be on mute.
Yes, that happens. If I can get the panel off mute also, I will start the panel now. And what I would like to start off with is to ask the panel how they started out. So, Brad, I think you're first on my screen, so I'll call out to you first. How and when did you first learn about energy-based safety, and what buy-in did you need to make it actually work?
Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to be part of the panel today. I'm honored and humbled to be with such a great group talking about such an important topic. By way of introduction, my name is Brad McLean, and Senior Vice President of Safety and Organizational Effectiveness at the Wolf Creek Group of Companies here in Houston. As Matt said, we're kind of shivering in snow down here today. But as a former Canuck, my blood is thin just as much as every other Texan. So we're trying to figure out how to deal with this blast of the Canadian cold front down here. Um, a little bit of color on my background. I've been in HSE 34, going on 35 years. I kind of joke that one of my claims to fame is that over those 35 years, I've made almost every single mistake you can make in safety. So that's contributed to my gray hair and scar tissue. Well, that and four daughters and one granddaughter. Um, I'm a founding member and first chair of the Construction Safety Research Alliance. So it's afforded me an opportunity to see the SIF prevention movement and kind of really be in the front row of this as it's developed over the past couple of years, bringing evidence to the notion of serious injury and fatality prevention. Speaking to your question, kind of the history and how I've approached it with respect to implementation, kind of what was the tipping point. Um, you know, Energy-based safety goes back a long way. I remember when I was trained on safety in the 90s. Now I'm really dating myself. It was drilled into my head: follow the energy, follow the energy, follow the energy. We kind of got away from that over the years, and we didn't have any science, just kind of knew it instinctively. And we got into all sorts of other approaches to safety, which have been wildly successful in preventing total recordable injury rates. But as Matt mentioned in the outset, have really not moved the needle on fatalities and serious incidents. I think the breakthrough with the SIF prevention approach was really just the realization of that graph that Matt mentioned at the outset. Understanding that we've been wildly successful over the past decades of reducing the frequency of what I call high frequency, low consequence safety, or slips, trips, and falls, or sprains, trains, and automobiles. We've been great at it. Things like pre-jobs and case management and really kind of making our statistics, kind of dance. We've been great at it, and we have these huge surprises. These years go by where we're doing great on TRIR, and our organizations suffer these highly traumatic and tragic incidents, fatalities, and life altering events. So I think the realization that that had to change was the change agent. And once we understood that, and we started identifying that the way forward was an evidence-based approach, then all the toggles in the lock kind of, or the tumblers rather, in the lock kind of fell into place. And the body of work that's been developed over the past 5 years is really a game changer. I'll step back into queue.
Okay, that's very enlightening. Thank you so much for that one, Brad. I will then move on to our next panelist. Paul, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
go ahead. Please go ahead. How did you kick off things with the energy-based safety?
Yeah. I'll start with an introduction. That mimic Brad. Really happy to be here. Really excited. It's pretty awesome. Have been involved with CSRA now for a few years, and first time participating in one of these events. But definitely drinking the Kool-Aid here the last few years, and really excited about where we're at, where we're going, and being able to participate with this group. So appreciate y'all having me. But my name is Paul Duke, Senior Safety Director with Holder Construction. I've been with Holder for about 10 years. Graduated from Illinois State and have bounced around. I've lived and been very fortunate to be on some awesome projects: California, Texas, Dallas, Texas, Denver, Atlanta, and most recently, stepped in more of a corporate role where I'm supporting most of our mission critical big data center clients as well as big aviation. So spend a lot of my time, like probably a lot of you on this call, traveling and helping support our operations teams. A little bit about Holder, unique. We don't do a ton of self-perform. We certainly have laborers and carpenters, but we mostly manage a lot of our trade partners. So yeah, I would say 2017, 2018, certainly into 2019, we really started stepping into a little bit different game with some of our hyperscale mission critical clients. They were really challenging us from a safety perspective to be different, act differently, and be better. Quite frankly, we thought we were pretty good at safety, and we had great metrics and all that stuff, but good wasn't good enough. So it was really interesting at a young point or early point in my career, coming off of Apple Park project, where I spent 2.5 years, was able to start stepping in and helping with a lot of these major programs, and being able to think differently. I had a mentor who introduced me to human performance, so I was able to start human performance, human error concepts. So started doing a lot of research, listening to Todd Conklin and City Decker and many others, and was really struggling with the theory versus practice. And when I was first introduced to energy based safety, I guess was probably, it had to have been 2019, 2020. We're getting ready to start a big project at Denver International Airport. I was a site lead and was working with several people, but mainly Rick Zellen, who is now with Holder, was with Zurich at the time. And he said, hey, you guys should really check out Dr. Hollowell and the CSRA. They're doing some awesome things with the energy wheel. And that was really my first introduction to the concept and to the people. From there, was able to get linked up, and I think I attended the first or second conference, perhaps. Got an invite and was just really blown away with where we're at, and it really just was something that clicked for me, and the thought of focusing on SIFs really resonated. So it was interesting. Had to spend a lot of time trying to convince our leadership, to go spend the money to join the CSRA, to start rolling out the training. But once we did that, it really was interesting to watch eyes open, and in those aha moments with our superintendent group specifically. It really just seemed to make sense. So this is what we've been waiting for. This all really clicks. But we were very fortunate. Kind of at the same time, we were going through an effort to bring out some builder's expertise type training, and we were actually working parallel paths with Dr. Hollowell on bringing some of that into the fold, which had some energy based safety training. But I would say we were kind of a grassroots organization, so getting out in front of people, having a lot of one-on-one conversations. That was how we started, and how I was introduced, and that's how we kind of continued to this day, really.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. Now I see a little bit of a buffer in our stream. So I'm going to see if this helps with Brian's visual. It seems like it's not going out, but let's try. Brian, could you let us introduce yourself and let us know how you started off? So let me cut you off there a little bit. It seems like there's an issue with the stream. And they're not able to hear you. So I'll try a different interface and see if that works for you. Let me see if that will be better. Could you go back and maybe log back in again? I think that may help us.
Elif, can anybody hear you online? Is it
I
just, or
think
is it just Brian? Because it seems like
just Brian. It's just Brian that they cannot.
okay. Thanks, Brian. Sorry, dude.
Thanks, Brian. Okay. Matt, I'll actually move to you for now. And I wanted to ask you, energy-based safety is still very new to a lot of folks. Where do we start? How do we start?
Yeah, so I'll answer briefly, but I'll kick it back over to Brad and Paul, since they've actually done it. I never have, right? I've only helped and whatnot. But I think with energy-based safety, the energy wheel is the best gateway. It's a quick win. It helps people do what they're already doing, but better. There is an investment in training. You know, you need to get people informed about how to use it. But otherwise, with once it's there and in the ether, it's not a technology, doesn't have a recurring expense. It is a new kind of fresh way to look at the old thing. So I always suggest to folks to start with the energy wheel and pick a particular activity like pre-job briefs or something along those lines, and it tends to resonate well in the field. So number one, that's the topic I start with, and the other thing I think is really important is having a good pilot study, for lack of a better word, meaning find a group, do it really well with that group, get your feedback, work the bugs out, create your success story with using it with a small group, and then scale. And don't go too far too fast. So those are the things, like just a few sound bites from my end. If you're getting started, the biggest mistake I think is try to do all of energy-based safety in a big bite and do it with everybody everywhere. That's just the perfect recipe to fall on your face, right? But if you can start with a smaller group, start with the energy wheel, and keep the momentum rolling into other things like high energy and controls, you can build on your successes and build over time. This is not something to do over a short period. It's a kind of the long game. So I'll kick it to the other panelists. Maybe, I don't know, Brian, if you were hearing that, maybe you could try again there.
Um, I think we still don't have him in the stream for
Oh,
some
okay.
reason. I think his camera is too high quality for Vimeo for now. But I'll kick it back to Brad while we're trying to resolve the issue. Brad?
Sure. Thanks, Lee. Actually, I'd like to touch on a couple of points that have already been made, frankly. But before I do that, I think we need to give ourselves a little bit of grace as a community and around the adoption of energy-based approach, and even on some of the early elements. Um, Even the folks that have been doing this for a few years, I would put in the category of early adopters, right? I mean, this cake ain't baked, and we're still working through what good looks like on specific approaches and tools. I mean, we've got the contours, and the research is telling us an awful lot of really great things. Um, and not but and we're still working through this. There is no cookie cutter approach. There is no perfectly optimized sort of model. There is a little bit of making this fit to the nature, scale, and scope of our organizations, and even the ones that have been working it for a few years. Again, I would put in that category of early adopters. um, that said, um, I think a couple things that have already been mentioned warrant some punctuation points. First one is that a lot of this is based upon what we already do, right? So we're taking a lot of the activities, the approaches, and all we're doing is we're making a quarter turn, right? This is collectively, this is a radical change. But if you go to sort of the tactical level, a lot of the activities that we do, like pre-jobs and collecting metrics and observations and leadership engagements, a lot of those things merely take a little bit of a slight modification, a quarter turn, that taken together give us this movement towards serious injury and fatality and fatality prevention. So that quarter turn is key. The second point I would like to reinforce is what Matt just said: is you go slow to go fast, right? Think of this like fishing, right? So many times we've pushed for these changes, even incremental changes in safety. And we've put our organizations on the hamster wheel of the program of the month, or the latest and greatest kind of deal, where um, if you're fishing, you want to set the hook deep, not quick, and going slow to go fast will make this much more sustainable. And then the final point this has been mentioned a couple times: the folks that identify with this the most are the frontline staff, superintendents, the foremen, the individual contributors, the folks on the tools, the crafts. When we arrive with this work, the overwhelming reaction that I've heard folks convey is, "What took you so long?" Right? So for a long time, we've been talking about recordables and minor incidents, and they've known instinctively that real safety was preventing serious injuries and fatalities. And when we showed up and we talk about this, and we were trying to advance these approaches, trying to modify these tools, trying to take the energy wheel, for instance, and integrate it into the sort of the bloodstream of our organizations, so that we're raising the energy-based IQ of those organizations. Their first reactions are, "What took you so long?" Because they've known this instinctively, and now that when we show up with a little bit of evidence and some approaches where we're trying to advance this as an organization, they're all on board.
Thank you so much for that, Brad. And I definitely have seen the same response from some organizations too. It's like, we knew this all along. You just had to say it now, right? Paul, what did implementation look like for you?
Yeah, I would mimic Brad. We're still very early on. We've got some, we do a lot of these days, a lot of big long-term projects or campus projects where we'll start a building. It seems like we're there for several years, just with multiple phases, which is great because we're able to really sink in and educate the craft workers and our trade partners. So, but I would say we have a lot of new jobs where we're starting essentially from scratch. Whether we've got new team members that haven't been exposed or a new client. We've spent a lot of time working with clients, several of which are now part of the CSRA, trying to spread some education and help steer the conversation away from the old school stick and carrot and TRIR being king, and that's taken a lot of effort. But we've also spent an incredible amount of time, resources, energy, money, so on and so forth with trying to educate our trade partners. For us, that's what's really going to move the needle. Getting them bought in, understanding that their leadership knows what we and our clients are looking for. That's what has really moved the needle. So I would say varying levels of implementation, but it takes a lot of one-on-one coaching, and it sometimes is difficult to change the way we've been taught to interact with safety. And I think what we've come to realize is engagement is more important than perfection. Getting people to understand some of these concepts and starting to roll it out is really what we're focused on. And it's not always going to be pretty. It's not always going to be perfect, but trying just to focus really on the education and then behind the scenes. We've rolled out the SBLI metric that we're starting to use, and we're sharing that with not just internally, but with our clients as well, which is kind of a new thing over the last 12 months or so. So trying to implement things behind the scenes and push them out as our teams are ready, but not trying to overload them. Go focus on the basics, and teams that really get that and have been able to function and roll out these concepts over a period of years. You see that with how they're focused on high risk activities and high risk activity planning, executing go no go meetings, and it's pretty cool when you see them talk about the all the way down to the craft worker level these concepts, but it does take time. So for everybody who's just getting into it or trying to figure out how to adopt it, there's no one size fits all approach. Figure out what works for your organization and keep on trucking.
For sure. And I think that's a really nice segue to our next question about training. But before we do that, I will try and refresh just to see if we can hear Brian now. And I think we may be able to. Can we hear Brian now? Can I get some feedback from the audience? It doesn't seem like it's going through, Brian. So I will add you as a new speaker. Could you use the new link as we move forward? I don't hear you. I will do that right now. But while
It's
we're,
going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it, Elise.
I think so. Could we talk a little bit about training? And I normally actually should start with the industry folks for this one, but I want to start with you, Matt, because you are a trainer, right? How would you see folks being trained on energy-based safety? What worked well, what doesn't? And you have been here for the very beginning of energy-based safety. So, what would you have done differently throughout the process?
Well, so I guess I'm an educator, and I do some training. So I'll comment on it from that perspective as a person doing some of the delivering. I think anytime you train folks in the field, there's also, I always see a healthy skepticism out there when I show up. Now, partially it's because this guy with the PhD is coming in. What the hell does he know? And, there's usually a grumpy dude in the back who doesn't want to be there. And he makes it very well known that doesn't want to be there. And I'm like, all right, that's my guy. If I can convert this guy by the end of the session, then it went well enough. Right. So I say that just because, I think we always need to respect the fact that, safety can be seen as a flavor of the day, and that's a matter of our own doing, right? We go from topic to topic and idea to idea, and then we show them a triangle and say this is the way it works, and then somebody comes in later and says no, that pyramid's bullshit, and we got to move on, and you get the idea, right? So there's some healthy skepticism, and so I start with a couple of things. The first is I do remind them to the earlier points. This isn't something new. I'm not here to give you another piece of paperwork or something that in theory will take you more time. Um, and the other thing I think, like, take the energy wheel for example. I think it's important to show people why this is even needed. Okay, so the first thing I start with when I do a session is I show a picture and I say, what hazards do you see? And you have an audience of a dozen people or so, and they'll see some hazards. And then if you can show them that even with a picture and a room full of people recognizing hazards, that some just go unnoticed, then you get their attention. They're like, all right, maybe he has something to say. So I think you kind of have to set the hook with them and show them why this is needed before giving them another thing or a new thing. Show them that it's they want to be good at, or that they need to be good, perfect at it. And it's an all of us problem. So if you miss a hazard, it's not smart enough or well trained enough blind spots, and show them that. Is I know there's probably this, but I think it is important to show a little bit and show them this isn't a flavor of the day. There's behind it and some work that has been done in the background, so it isn't going to be a fleeting campaign like the ones they may have seen in the past. So I'll kick it back. Those are some of my observations as a trainer, and that's probably born out of a lot of mistakes I made trying to be like, look, here's a new thing, and they're like, nah, we don't need a new thing. And I'm like, well, maybe I have to show them they need a new thing first. So, anyways.
I'm losing my panelists one by one, but don't you worry, Matt was glitching, but we understood him fully, I think. I've been seeing him glitching, so it was a little bit in and out, but we heard everything. But we have Brian back, so I think he's now here and we can hear him. So thank you so much for that insight on training, Matt. But without further ado, I would like to have Brian introduce himself, and then maybe give us a quick intro about how he started out, what did the implementation look like, and go into the training question as well, if you may.
Great. Thanks, Alif. Hope everybody can hear me. Sorry for the technology issues. It's probably user error, if truth be known. But I'm Brian Adams, Director of Safety Services for NiSource, which is a natural gas and electric utility company operating in 6 states. I've been with the company for 38 years in the HSE world since about 2008. So appreciate the opportunity to share with you guys. So let me, I'll run through these and catch up real quick. The first one was how do we learn about EBS and how do we get started? I heard about the SEL model and the energy wheel probably 2001, early 2022, reached out to Dr. Hollowell, engaged with him, went through some of the slides we just saw earlier. And quite honestly, the one slide that shows the flat fatality rate really resonated with me. Coming from an operations background, I got that. And the statement, the hazards that hurt us is different from the hazard that kills us. So I took that back to our chief safety officer, and really my big pitch, and I think we all will agree, we're in safety, we're always trying to advance the ball and get better and reduce these type of injuries and stuff. So really my pitch to the chief safety officer was really our vision of new safety is that it's not a new flavor of the month. It's really just building and improving on what we're already doing around hazard recognition, primarily with pre-job briefs. So that really got my foot in the door and really pitched the program. Really is just a great way for us to rebrand and refocus our workforce on the structure we're doing around, again, pre-job briefs, identifying hazards, prioritizing those, and controls. So been on the journey now for about 3 years, if you will. So the implementation piece, we started out with the SCL model internally with our safety department in early 2022. And quite honestly, that was fine. We started, talking PSIF, HSIF, things like that, and that verbiage caught on. So we really didn't train our operations team or our employees on it. We just kind of in safety. But we took really the slow roll approach, as Matt referenced earlier. We spent 22 building out our strategy, building materials leading up to the energy wheel. We started with that in 23, followed by sticky direct controls in 24, and we're going to roll out HECA this year in 2025. So you want me to go into training, Alif?
Yeah,
To
go for
catch
it.
us
You
up
earned it.
while I
Yes.
have the floor?
Yeah.
So, like I said, in 2022, we really introduced EBS to our safety department. And we really used the safety function training videos and took all of our safety managers, safety coordinators, everybody through the full training so that they fully understood where we were going, what they were doing, and they are that support in the field. Then, after we received our buy-in from the executive team, we went to work on developing our internal training, and we really based it on doing a virtual approach to it. Granted, at the time we're a year out of COVID, and so it was kind of a weird time. So we did a virtual train the trainer approach, if you will, for our frontline leaders, and let them carry that message of the energy wheel with appropriate training materials that we provided back to their team. So in 2024, we kept that same train the trainer approach for sticky and direct controls, but we changed it up a little bit and we did an in-person training with the leaders this time. Really wasn't as effective as we would have liked doing the virtual. So we changed it up a little bit, saw kind of the improvements that we were looking for with that. And we just completed the development of our digital HECA form within our safety observation platform that we have internally. So we're getting ready to introduce HECA to our field safety department really next month, and we're going to start performing HECA assessments this year.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Brian. And so sorry for the technical difficulties. I don't know what was wrong, but we made it work. So thank you so much for your patience. So I know we have another 5 minutes to go, and we have some questions trickling in. And I think we're kind of going into that realm, but I would like to ask the other panelists, how where do you see the energy-based safety going next in the next steps, and how do you think we will be able to measure the effectiveness of it, right? How do we know it's working? And I will give the word to Paul for that one, and I'll go Brad to you afterwards. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I think that my hope is that we continue to gain momentum from education and adoption. I think there's still a lot of folks in the market that haven't seen or been exposed. I think we've got some work to do to, as an industry, continue to work on definitions and understanding, so we really can be consistent with how we're tracking, whether that's HECA or the SBLI, things of that nature. If we really want to change, I know Matt has said this, at least I've heard him say a few times, if we're not consistent, then we're just going to end up with another bad metric like TRIR. So I think that's super important. But I think HECA has a ton of potential. We have not we have played around with it. We have some people that are trying some things out, but we haven't fully adopted or rolled that out. But I think that's something that's on our really on our roadmap where we want to go roll that out here in the next 12 months. But ton of potential. I think we're continuing to really focus on the education piece here in 2025.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks, Lee. So if I recall correctly, there's two questions. Where's this all going, and how do we measure ourselves going forward? On the first one, I think the next challenge for us is connecting the dots. Right, Matt profiled on his last slide where you start to see the connectivity between each of the researched elements and how they've turned into tools and how now we're starting to see a logic, like a management system, right? And a management system is just a logic, right? And where does the power of a management system come from? It comes from its connectivity of its elements. And I think what you're going to see us going forward is to strengthen that connectivity and to make almost sort of a unified theory of serious injury and fatality prevention using energy-based safety as its logic. And that for me is really exciting, right? Because that takes us out of safety as tacticians, and now we become strategists in organizations. We can rack and stack how we deploy interventions inside the organization. You saw this with our ROI project a little bit, right? If we can really kind of see the discrete improvements that a given intervention makes and then fit it within a bigger approach, a bigger strategy, then we find a whole new gear. The other thing is measuring the effectiveness, and this one is tricky because we tend to want to go back to our stitching, right? So we've done so well over the years with TRIR. We want to replace TRIR with SIFs or things like this, right? And we just create the same problem that we had, right? The problem with TRIR, it's rare data, and we're going to try to replace it with even rarer data. Well, that's not going to work. So what we do is we focus on the conditions that present or set up SIFs, right? So that's where the work of high energy control assessments come from. So where's the energy? Can we have fewer high energy sources? Where there are high energy sources that we can't reduce, can we have direct controls? What's the nature of those direct controls? So we start measuring the conditions where SIFs occur, and we kind of lower the temperature. I think of it like a thermostat. Um, and the measurements that we can impart to that, and you've done work in this, and our research community is giving us more and more metrics in this area. But if we think of this as lowering the temperature where the probability of SIFs occur, then I think we're on the right track on how we rewire our brains around measurement.
Thank you so much for that one, Brad. And I think we're at our time as a panel. So I'd like to ask if any of you have any parting thoughts before I move to the Q&A and start asking you questions that people have been putting in the chat here.
Maybe give Brian the floor real quick.
Yeah, go for it, Brian.
Hey, just one, I think Brad really nailed it. I think to me the future is really HECA, and what do we get out of that? As an industry, can we identify tasks that don't have direct controls, and can we work differently in the future, right? But for us right now, it's our focus is on continuing our energy recognition program and really making sure that energy wheel sticky direct controls is built into our technical training, so that our employees get refreshed every time they start to connect the dots. We're ensuring it's built into our HOP training. All of this for sustainability and building that thinking and that verbiage into everything that we do. So it's just not a safety-owned program. It's how we as a company operate. So we're really focused on building that into our organization as a whole. So we still have a lot to do over the next few years to accomplish that as the CSRA and the community moves forward with HECA and other items. So
Thank you so much. Yes, and absolutely. I definitely am a true believer in HECA, and everybody knows that. So I think the next question would be also good to continue with you, Brad. No, not Brad. Brian. Sorry. How do we the question is, how do we get these concepts into safety course curriculums? Or we're still seeing a lot of traditional approaches and still a lot of traditional training in this manner. And we're talking about all these futuristics. We want to go ahead with HECA. We want to be more data driven and learn more from our safety systems. We are basically revolutionizing it. But the education seems to be still lagging behind. Can you comment on that for a little bit?
Yeah, I would like to say it's an easy answer, but it's not. As in most organizations, your training, your HOP, these different organizations are matrixed within your company. So safety really doesn't have as much control over that as you can. But I would say getting the buy-in at the top so that people understand the need of how to build it in, then dedicate the appropriate resources and training and facilitating and stuff that's needed for these other teams. We have spent, um, Tyler Launcher on my team has done countless sessions with our technical training group, with our engineering teams, all these other folks, to introduce energy wheels, sticky, direct control concepts to them early on, so that as we start to advance that and build it into their training and curricula, it's not new, right? They're starting to know it. So we traditionally approach this as a frontline employee type of program because that's where 90% of the risk is at. But it's really an organizational program that everybody has to be bought into.
I see. And I think connected with that one, we got this question saying that, why do you think field personnel take it so well? This is not the norm. And I think combined with that question, how were they able to engage, coach, lead the middle management to not focus on low energy? Because we're trying to refocus on high energy. And the low energy combined has been the norm for a long, long time. So I think I'll direct this question to Paul.
My gut reaction is craft workers and foremen like to cuss, so sticky really resonates with them. They enjoy that, and it makes sense. But a little bit more on the serious, I think they live it every day. They're surrounded by these hazards, so when you're talking about the shit that can kill you, it resonates with them. Middle management, people that are not perhaps out in the field or maybe didn't come up through the trade, haven't seen some of those really bad incidents. Maybe it doesn't resonate as quickly, but I think we've had success with our project managers and executives, even middle management throughout the spectrum, buying in and understanding because it resonates with what they're seeing. And I think other people, I think the flip side of that is we've all dealt with safety professionals that only focus on the low hanging fruit and can make a project really, from a cultural perspective, miserable, to be blunt. And it resonates when you start focusing on other things that they think move the needle. So as safety professionals, when we get rid of that cop mentality and start focusing on things that really resonate, I think that helps.
For sure. Anything else to add, Matt, Brad, on this
I
one?
would offer one point of counsel on the middle management piece. The middle management, and everyone's on the same page as far as the frontline staff. Again, the folks that love this the most, I believe, are the frontline staff because they see an alignment between what they understand instinctively is the real safety and what we're bringing forward. But the middle management is a challenge because what happens when the organization becomes stressed? What happens when you get 3 recordables in 1 month? Right? What's the organization's response? And you really need to get ahead of that. And the way you get ahead of that is with the senior management, because if the senior management has not been counseled and has not thought through that and has not sort of have a break glass and emergency sort of response to that, then they're going to activate that middle management, and then you're going to sort of pull yourself back into that cycle. There's an old saying: "What's interesting to my boss is fascinating to me," and you've got to make sure that the senior management are interested in SIF prevention and have a basic literacy of this new strategy, not if, but when the organization becomes stressed and has a string of recordables, are you going to revert, or are you going to actually push through to a new approach, a new conversation, and the beginnings of a new organizational climate?
Very well said, Brad. Honestly. And I think you, while talking about that one, you also answered two other questions about what would the senior management do? What would board say about all of this? Anything else to add on this front before I move on to a more technology related question?
If I just want to go back to the education piece, like most of you, probably trying to find young or talented safety professionals is very difficult. We have really focused on recruiting. There's a number of schools. I won't stump for any of them, but I do think, we've been able to get on some of the boards to talk to the professors about some of these concepts. Board of advisors, I should say. So I think that's an opportunity for us to try to help shift where people are focused from an education perspective at the college level, which I know we're getting a lot of safety professionals. So just maybe a different way of thinking about that particular problem.
Um, okay, yeah, for sure. And that was a very good addition. One other question that I would like to ask before we close, we have 4 minutes left, is what kind of technology is out there to help out with this? Are there potential for BIM models, or are there calculators that people can use? What are the resources? And I think I'll start with you on that one, Matt.
Yeah, I'll be quick. There's a saying, I learned it from Ellen Quinn. Some of you might remember Ellen from Otis. She's since retired, but she said, if you can't do it on paper first, you have no business using a technology to do it. And I actually like that, as it harkens back to my engineering undergrad days when I was a grumpy little undergrad student, wondering why I couldn't just use a computer to answer all the questions. But truly, I think it's important that we're able to do these things in sort of an analog fashion first. There's technology is emerging rapidly. So I would be actually terrified if somebody said, I'm using this technology to recognize all my high energy hazards, because I'm not sure we're all that good at it yet as human beings. So I don't know what humans are training these technologies to do it. So with that said, I think that there are there's, with generative AI and all these other things emerging, I think there will be tools that will help us with hazard recognition, control assessments, and so on. But I see them as collaborators, right? A way to check our work, not a way to do our work for us. And if we use those technologies to check what we're doing, and make sure we didn't miss anything, then we're being additive. I'm afraid, given what I've seen from some of the computer vision models and other things, is that they're not necessarily better than us. And so we may actually take a step backwards by using them in their current form, the way I think the knee jerk reaction is to use them. But yeah, that's my 2 cents. It's maybe a little bit not as, quite as perfectly optimistic as you might see from some of the folks who have technologies that they'd like to sell you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I think I'll close the questions for now because we're reaching the end of our session. Any parting thoughts that you want to end our discussion with before I close?
Leaf, I'd like to offer a thought as other folks are sort of gathering theirs. I think we need to do it, right? I'll steal a page from Matt. He's got a construct that he uses. How many recordables would you trade for a stiff? And it doesn't matter what the answer is; it comes out really big. And if that's true, then that means we have to apply this as a commensurate operational priority. And even the best of us are still not doing that. So we need to go out there and do this stuff. The question of technology and what Matt just said, technology is merely the application of science. And when you're applying it, that means you got to be doing it. So we've got to be doing this stuff on the side of a right of way, on construction sites. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. So you can make a lot of mistakes. It's hard to make a mistake if you're trying to do something. So go do something.
Thank you so much for that, Brad. Well, with that, I'd like to thank all of my panelists and all of the audience for coming in and engaging in this very insightful conversation. I apologize for any of the technical difficulties we have, new platform, but I'm hoping that we will be able to remedy that for the future community of practices. Again, if you couldn't find the unmute button, the screen was not loading, we recorded this session and you can revisit the content anytime. It will be posted on the Community of Practice website. And our next community of practice is on February 18th, related to the tyranny of TRIR. So a very exciting topic indeed. And thank you again for being a part of this community of practice today. With that, I would like to close. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.